Welcome to the Women and Allies Telecom Brunch. This is our third annual Telecom Women and Allies in Telecom. And I think the last time we were all together was in 2019 in Amsterdam at TIP Summit. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I'm Cait Campos. I'm a product strategist at Meta and a co-lead for the TIP Diversity Committee. And the TIP Diversity Committee we had the vision for it actually at TIP Summit in 2019 of, we don't want to just have a one-off panel every year to talk about diversity. We want to have an execution arm. We want to bring in, industry leaders who are passionate about bringing more diversity into telecom to make progress and take this really big problem and try to solve it kind of a day at a time. So I'm super excited about just being here today and actually being able to talk to you a little bit about kind of the progress we've made. So as the TIP Diversity Committee, our mission is really to strengthen the connectivity ecosystem by bringing diverse voices to drive innovation. So we set out this pretty ambitious mission to tackle this problem of diversity, and we started with two goals. The first is to really bring more representation and female voices to industry-wide events. And Kristian will talk a little bit about how we thought about that for planning for Fyuz today. And the second goal was around just bringing more women into telecom. And really starting with early pipeline development because we want to grow the pie. We want there to be more people who are excited and getting exposure to telecom kind of earlier in their career. And so, we've seen a lot of great progress. The TIP Diversity Committee has over 20 companies represented, and we're meeting, every 2 weeks to really move the needle on this conversation. So, I think about when we talk about early education and early pipeline development. Cristina here, you'll hear her story, started in telecom when she was 12. That's pretty incredible. I thought, I would like to hear if anyone can beat that. That's pretty good. We're going to talk about just the importance of allies, and we've invited Dan and Kristian onto this panel because we don't want this to be just about women empowering women, but it's really about allies. And I think they're just great examples of people who have sponsored and really just lifted up women in telecom. And so, I really am just encouraged, I feel like there was such a good energy this morning of, this is one of those topics that I feel like, we can get more personal and a little bit more vulnerable, and that's our goal today, is to be open about kind of the progress that we made. And, I hope you've noticed that at Fyuz, there's been more, there's much more female representation, just both in terms of attendees and speakers, and that really has stemmed from just kind of zooming out and thinking about how do we make this top of mind for people, and how do we encourage just more female voices in these industry-wide events, and so I want to just stress why are we all here today, and why is diversity important? And I know we know this, but there's two data points for me that really stand out. The Boston Consulting Group did a study that said that companies that have a higher than average diversity score had a 46% of their revenue coming from innovative work streams. Companies who scored lower in diversity only had 26% of their revenue coming from innovation. So, that to me is this powerful stat of when we can break down the barrier of having a more inclusive work environment and having more voices at the table, we see a business value. So it's not just a people value, but I really want to stress that there's a business value proposition to us, having more diversity in our company and in our industry. The second data point, this one was kind of a reframing for me, is that the World Economic Forum in 2020 did a study that said that the biggest barrier to to closing the gender economic gap was lack of representation of females in the technology sector. So let me say that one more time, because it's really powerful. The largest barrier to closing the economic gender gap is lack of representation of women in technology. To me, this is something that we're all well positioned to really influence that outcome of really changing, not just for telecom, but thinking about all the other, how do we create a framework for other sectors to think about taking on such an ambitious and complex challenge like diversity. And I do want to say that diversity is much more than just women. The TIP Diversity Committee has decided to start with women, and we really wanted to narrow our focus so that we had a greater chance of succeeding. And really, we hope to expand our focus areas to include other types of diversity and inclusion. And we'll hear a little bit about that today from Kristian and Dan on other types of diversity for telecom. But I really want to we have a powerhouse panel of just of people who've been in the industry for 26 plus years. And it's exciting for me to be here today to just have a single session focused on women in telecom and women and allies in telecom. So without further ado, let me pass it over to the panelists to give a brief introduction. And Julie, why don't we start with you?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. So I have been working in the electrical engineering field for 30 years. For 26 years, I've been working for the National Telecommunications and Information Administration under the U.S. Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Julie. Go ahead, Kristian.
Okay, I'm Kristian Toivo, Executive Director of TIP, and it was funny when Cait said that 26 plus years, so I certainly start with a 3. And it's more than 5 in this industry as a second digit, so it's a long time. And everything that Cait said is obviously kind of, I can empirically confirm that this journey is we are still at an early stage of the journey, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so my background is obviously anything from software development to being part of deploying mobile networks to selling those things, and now after a brief stint in the IT industry, I'm back in the connectivity and networks again, but in a fantastic position in hopefully being able to facilitate some of these big transformations we're all working on. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here, great energy. I'm Cristina Rodriguez. I run the RAN business at Intel. I have an engineering background, EE, computer science, and then now into business. Great vibe. 20-something years, but again, remember, we started at 12, so don't make any math here, right? And again, great to be here.
Good morning, everyone. Eugina Jordan. I'm a Chief Marketing Officer for TIP, and I actually started my career in the industry 22 years ago on the bottom, worked my way up from a receptionist to a C-suite. So if I can do it, so anyone else in telecom.
That's a wonderful story too. I'm Dan Rabinovitsj. I think my number of years is starting with a 3, and I won't go beyond that. I started my career working on public telephone switching, so like very old technology, moved into wireless, and never looked back. So yeah, and I think for me personally, the intensity around my feelings around this topic were really driven by my daughter, who is now an engineer. And I see Hannah and Sandra from our Boston office, software engineers. I think that's what is really driving me more than anything, is to think about how little we've made progress over the past 20 years in this particular domain, and I want to make sure that my daughter and everybody else's daughters have a chance to grow in their careers the same way that men do.
I love that, and thank you for, as we can tell, I think the sharing of the stories to me is just something that is important for people to hear. And so I want to start on the topic of allyship. You know, Kristian, you're someone who, it's been great to get to work with you with Fyuz, but you're someone to me who, you walk the walk. You know, 50% of your direct reports have always been males or and females. We recently had 2 female board members join the TIP board. That's incredible. You know, we've got Eugina in the C-suite at TIP. And I think you've really helped lead the change in terms of bringing diversity top of mind for Fyuz. And tell us a little bit about, you know, how did you get the team to think about this, and what did it look like for you?
Right. Right. So, and I do think it's good you say, but it's very much about practical things. I mean, we can have grand, and we, by the way, do need to have objectives, and we talk about that a bit later. But ultimately, it's about concrete decisions we all make, and it goes both ways, of course. If you are in a position as a leader where you can choose, you have the opportunity to choose your team members. I mean, then it's about how you make those decisions, what you are looking for. Are you looking broadly enough? But of course, it also means that they need to be the candidates around. So that goes back to everybody in this room and beyond. That, I mean, all of you and all of us have to also make ourselves available and show an interest and ambition, which also needs to be worked upon, because it's about self-confidence, it's about showing examples like Eugina was talking about and so forth. But on a very practical note, and this goes back some years, I mean, obviously, it takes some time in anybody's career before you have the opportunity to make those choices yourself. So when I've had those choices, and actually those, I would say my journey on the diversity side started actually in this city in Madrid. I was here 12 years ago setting up an account team, and I had an opportunity to choose who would work with me in that team. And I really spent some I didn't take what was told to me by my boss, saying take this guy, take that guy, but I actually thought I will talk around and walk around a bit. And I very quickly found out that there were a lot of capable people, both men and women in the organization. And I did a bit of an extra effort to try to get to know who would be those diverse candidates, the female candidates that could be available. And I had an interesting experience with one of them that, by the way, also then followed me to South Africa to my other following team. She actually challenged me in terms of, would she want to work with me? What type of leader would I be? Am I doing this because I have to do it, or am I doing it because, you know, I really want diversity in the team? And long story short, from that point, more than 10 years ago, I became kind of convinced that what we need to do in whatever team we have, whether it's a leadership team or a project team, going back to some of those facts that Cait talked about. I mean, it's kind of obvious if you have a diverse setup, you just simply get different, more alternative ideas and opinions on the table, and you kind of, can't express the full statement, but you remove the BS factor that you very often have in a kind of all-male environment, where you kind of know too early what is supposedly the right way forward, rather than debating and discussing alternatives. So from that on, it's been my opportunity and pleasure to, when I have a chance to form a team or adjust a team, to make that effort to try to find out who could be those alternative candidates. And then obviously we put the expectations, they have to be the same. It's not like, you know, we should lower the standards. We are looking for people who are the right people for the jobs. And there simply are always alternatives also from the other gender.
I think something that, you know, I think Eugina, you actually started this before we started working together, but we have this speaker list of women in the industry who we think are just incredible speakers. But like, let's build that Rolodex. That was, you know, that was a big push for the TIP diversity community. Like, how can we make sure that there's, you know, I think Kristian, to dig a little bit deeper on this, when we were talking about Fyuz, we were saying, let's go that extra step and ask, you know, let's ask for a candidate. And if there's a diverse candidate that a company was willing to put up, we would like to see, you know, options of people. And maybe you can talk a little bit just about even just, you know, we've made progress. From 2019 till today, it does look different.
Yes.
And it feels different. it's not enough. It's not 50-50.
No.
But can you talk a little bit just about the, yeah.
Yeah, very briefly. You mentioned earlier the topic of setting objectives, and in this case, you were very clear. You set an objective for us that we should have 30% female speakers in Fyuz. And as the team, the team that was working with the agenda, it was many people, of course, some of them in this room and others. We kind of embraced that objective, knowing it's difficult to achieve. And by the way, we did not achieve it. I think we will hover around 25% or slightly below that. But it's better than last time, and it's a good platform to kind of motivate to continue it. But to your point, what we then did was every single session that we had on the main stage particularly, we were coming back over and over again in the agenda team to kind of discuss, do we have the alternatives? And in some cases, actually, I did make the calls, calling the telco lead of some company, say, no, we do want a female candidate. And to be honest, I got a good response. Then unfortunately, some of those that we asked for then fell out due to very practical reasons on the last mile, which kind of led to us not reaching our goal. But I think it's very practical. If you set an objective, then you need to work with it on a daily basis and not always take no for an answer. So I think that's kind of what we try to work with.
Yeah.
Some progress, but not a perfect result, but at least progress.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, what we developed was a framework that we can apply. And we're working together with the women in TV and media and cable industry. We're working with. We want to take this framework and see, can we apply it to working with GSMA at MWC, for example. Can we help the finance sector, who also is struggling with the diversity problem, to think about just going that extra step and kind of the tools and processes that we had to support this goal. So I want to move on a little bit to our second kind of objective at the TIP Diversity Committee, which is early pipeline development. Cristina, it really is an incredible, I want to learn more about just, what did it mean to start in telecom at 12? But seriously, we have some representation from Madrid, IE, a university in the room today, and I want to, how did starting at such a young age shape your, career into, now you're a VP at Intel, leading a P&L. So tell us a little bit about your experience.
So Cait, the 12 years old was kind of a little bit of a joke and an exaggeration. So I could say that I've been in the industry for 20 years without anybody drawing conclusions here. So let's not take that right to the, But I would say I did always have an inclination for, when you're growing up, an inclination for math and physics, and, you get the normal, teachers not fully recognizing that, and some teachers would, some other, or being in college, for example, I remember this time I had a partner in the lab, and the guy had no interest in spending too much time. I did the whole setup of the circuit. It was fantastic, and the teacher came, the professor came, I'm like, asking the guy all the questions, right? And I'm like, really? Come on, and But we all deal with things like that and still some of that still happens, right? But I think it takes, you like something, this is your passion, and you, like anybody else, men and women, you follow your passion, and you stayed at it, and you don't give up, and you're not gonna. One of the things, for example, that it happens very often, still happen to me, right? Because of our voice tone, we get interrupted a lot, right? We're in a meeting and people talk over us, and it's not intentional. It's like it's easier to talk over us because we don't have a powerful voice, and don't take it. Like I haven't finished, right? Go on. And I think it's important that you make your voice, and number one, you follow your passion, your belief in what you can do, and you stay at it and you work hard, because everybody, if you want to be successful, you do have to work hard. There's no substitute for that, right? Don't think there's no substitute for working hard, and be responsible and accountable for your actions. And then believe on you and stand on yourself and support each other. I'll say one more thing. I'm fortunate enough to work with fantastic women, Caroline, Valerie, somewhere there, and we have a really good community at Intel. We support we support each other, and I think it's important, super important. And now, like you were saying, you're in a position where I am in a meeting, and sometimes it's my team, sometimes it's the wider team, and somebody's trying to talk, and you know that person has something to say. Just, hey, you have something to say. Hold on, everybody. She has something to say, right? And just help bring that voice to, you're in a position now to make sure that people, and get people in the habit of listen. And it's about diversity. It's also listening to the sometimes quieter people that have a lot to say and are probably super smart, and you don't want to miss that opinion. And that includes men and women. But normally, a lot of times, often, it's the woman that get less the mic, and you have to, let's bring that voice up. Right.
Yeah, to me, maybe 12. You weren't you weren't a network engineer quite yet, but I think that is a powerful statement. And when I thought about that, I thought, we always think about the percentage of women in a sector or the percentage of women in a company, but to me that's a lagging indicator. And if we can start thinking about leading indicators of the percentage of women who were exposed to computer science or a technical field by the time they were in high school, how does that help? So it's not this catch-up game, or playing catch-up or trying to, it's the exposure early, and that's why I'm really excited. To me, it's growing the pie that I mentioned. And Julie, I want to talk a little bit about your experience. You've been at NTIA for 26 years. You are the second female division chief. That saying that you have to see it in order to believe it, it's very, that always strikes me as, it's very true, but that's not always possible. So how have you paved the way, being the second female division chief, how have you had to pave the way, and kind of, what would you attribute to you getting to this position?
Yes, thank you, Cait. So I was thinking about you being 12, and it brought back a memory of me being 3. So not that I'm trying to one-up you, Cristina, because we're supposed to support each other as women, but when I was 3, I came to my parents, and so my dad was a civil engineer, and my mom was the only woman who graduated as a chemistry major. And she went on for her master's as well in chemistry. So that was rare back then. But so I had very technical parents, so I inherited it, I think, for the most part. But I went to my parents and I said, at 3 4s make 12. And they're like, what? And I showed them the Coke cans were arranged 3 by 4, and I didn't know what multiplication was. But at that young age, I just had this affinity for math. I remember counting my steps as I walked, all sorts of things, looking for patterns. And so as growing up, I had these mentors that were my parents, and I would ask my dad, why is the sky blue? And he would tell me, like almost too much information sometimes, where I'm like, okay, I don't want to know anymore. But he would always tell me. So I always, had these mentors. And to me, that's a huge part of succeeding as women, is to have a mentor. And I am only the second female division chief, so at least I got to see one woman make it. But when I was thinking about making it to the next level, and I was one of the younger division chiefs, because I was in my 40s, which is actually younger in a government organization to make it to a high position, I sought out a mentor, and men can be great mentors as well, but I specifically wanted a female mentor. It was at a different organization because I didn't want to be, have any conflicts, working with a mentor at my own organization. But I went and found another female mentor who I really thought did a great job at leading people. And I would meet with her once a month, and I would ask her, you know, we were talking about very practical things, like, what do I do when I have a difficult employee? You know, how do I deal with that? How do I hold people accountable? How do I speak up in meetings? How do I, you know, attract more women to the organization? So these very practical things. And a big part was training as well. You know, I know we talked about imposter syndrome. So, you know, oh my gosh, how am I going to succeed? I don't know anything about supervising people. I don't know how to. So I had to, like, I've always felt like I had to go above and beyond. I always had to get, you know, straight A's. I always had to, you know, I had to prove myself, where I noticed a lot of men in my engineering classes, if they got C's, you know, that was okay. But I always felt like I had to totally prove myself in that instance. So, you know, there's just supporting each other and realizing it's okay to make a mistake. And I have the group that I supervise 11 federal employees and about 5 contractors, so 16 people. And a lot of my people are diverse in the fact that they're very introverted. You know, I have people that are maybe on the spectrum of you know, autism or something. I don't know for sure, but, you know, that spectrum of, you know, they're very afraid to speak up. So I really resonated with, I constantly talk to my group about, you need to speak up. We need to hear what you have to say. What you have to say is important. And with teams and being fully remote, it's been really hard for some of my remote people who already struggle with eye contact and oral communication, written communication. So I teach them very practical things like use the raise your hand in Teams. And then you don't, you know, because they don't, it's the opposite. They don't want to interrupt. They don't want to speak up. So raise your hand and we'll know you want to speak. You don't have to feel like you're interrupting, but we can still have you participate. And that's just super important, because if you don't hear your diversity of perspectives, if you just have a few extroverted people always speaking, you lose so much. So I would say that mentorship plus the diversity of perspectives and supporting each other to make it to the next level is super important. And now I do the same thing for the people in my group. Every time I get a new person, especially an intern, interns are very nervous, you know, coming to this big organization, oh my gosh, give them a mentor. Give them somebody they can talk to, and also form a team. You know, we have a team of interns, so you can get that support. Make it built in to make people succeed.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the idea of you leaving a legacy for the 3rd female division chief. You know, and it sounds like you're laying the groundwork for that. So that's incredible. And I think mentorship is such a big part of this. And actually, Dan, it's been great working with you, and you've actually taught me this idea of sponsorship. I'd love to ask you just a little bit. Can you help explain what's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship? And you know, you've been very you've taken this idea of sponsorship that can be sometimes just based off one-off connections and more, you know, people specific, but you've taken it and created a program at Meta around sponsorship. And to me, that's one of those kind of best practices that I'd love to hear you share a little bit more with the room. And so tell us about, you know, the difference of mentorship and sponsorship, and what does a sponsorship program look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, you know, I think I associate mentorship with what Julie was describing as really good coaching, and that kind of building an intimate relationship with someone that you trust, where you can get feedback on how to do various things. And I think all of us in our career, you know, can look back and say, I had someone who was a wonderful coach who was able to take that time. But I think when it comes to diversity, and whether this is bridging the gender gap, bridging the gap that we have with people of color in positions of power, LGBTQ people, wherever there is that diversity, it's really up to people, you know. And I love, my daughter always talks about the patriarchy, and I'm like, you know, preach, because, like, yes, you're right. White men are way too powerful. And I think understanding that power dynamic and taking the responsibility as an ally to say, I want to do more than the coaching piece, because, hey, I might not be the best coach. But when you identify really high potential people, with whatever background, I think it's our job now to lift those people up, give them opportunities very deliberately that they may not have if it takes 10 years for someone to get an opportunity, that's too long. And I feel like there's just so much in the system that's gaming this for white men, right? I'm just going to be blunt. And so we have to find a very authentic and effective way to just say, this is a project. Let's give this project opportunity to someone who is not a white man, just to be really blunt, and give that person the support they need to go and succeed and execute on that, and that feeds the next 10 of those. But if it's not deliberate, we don't make these changes fast enough. And so I think that's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Sponsorship is really like seeking the opportunities and providing the support required for people to succeed in those. And I think the more that we consider that as a kind of, for the men in the room, like this is our job. Like we have to figure this out, because as a society, we're literally operating with less than 50% capacity. We are underperforming, and I think that's the job. I hope that in 10 years we're on the stage going, gee, I wish we had better representation from men. Flip the script.
Likely though, but
yeah. So anyway, I don't think that happens by osmosis. We have to be a lot more thoughtful and deliberate.
People always ask me, so what can we do about bringing more women into telecom? And I said there's obviously no silver bullet, but if you're asking me about my experience, sponsorship has been the most critical piece of this. I think it is, like you mentioned, it's really just recognizing people's talents, using their strengths, and putting them up for maybe a role that might be a stretch, but how do we help bridge that gap through mentorship and through coaching? And to me, I think something that you've created with the kind of sponsorship program at Meta, it's when you create an inclusive environment, diversity is a natural outcome. And to me, that's a really, that's a really powerful thing when you have a whole team of people thinking about, who can I sponsor? You're inherently going to have more diversity. So I love that. Cristina, Eugina, you are someone, since I've met you in the past few months, you're someone who takes these very big problems and really tackles them one day at a time. And you just finished writing a book, or nearly finished writing a book, about how do you work in a workplace that wasn't designed for you? And that framing to me is just like, I love that. And can you tell us a little bit just about, your experience starting as a receptionist and getting into telecom and now in the C-suite? Tell us about a little bit about your book and your experience in the industry.
Thank you. So Dan, you should have written the first chapter of my book, because this is where I talk about the system. Because let's be realistic, the system does exist. So, but I also believe, and the title of my book is Unlimited, and that's why I'm wearing this T-shirt for today, because we cannot blame the system. We cannot feel like victims. We need to unlimit ourselves and break the barriers. And it might be hard, and as Cristina was saying, we might have to work a little harder, but if we believe in ourselves, we can do it. And then we also need to find our Dan, our Kristian, our Dave. And I told you I was going to call you out, because I wouldn't have gotten this job if Dave didn't mention my name to Kristian. So find Dan, Dave, Kristian, Iran in the back room, yes. Find those people, because they will mention your name in the room. They will give you the project that you want. They will believe that you can deliver on this project. And last, what I believe in, I'm talking about my book, the last chapter is Julie. So she was the first one, the second one, but she's going to make sure that she's not the last one. So if you get up to the C-suite, if you get up to that level, bring more people like you. And the reason I started the book, so during COVID, was not traveling, reading a lot, and I realized that majority of the leadership books were written by white men. 4 million leadership books, 350 written by females and immigrants. I'm going to ask you, what do you gentlemen know how hard it is to speak up in a room when you're the only one? The flutters you feel in your stomach, that you might get shut down or you might get interrupted. You don't. People like me, Cristina, Julie, Cait, we do know. And that's how the book was born. And the story I'm leading with, and if you walk away from, me speaking here, I want you to tell you a little story. And normally I would tell it standing up, but I'm going to try from here. So, actress Alex Bosch is accepting an award, Emmy Award, a few years ago. And she tells a story about her grandmother during World War II, a little girl standing in front of a pit, ready to be shot. So she asked, tiny little girl, she looked up to the guy and she said, to the guard, what would happen if I stepped out of line? And the guard told her, I'm probably not going to have the heart to shoot you, but someone else will. She stepped out of line, and for that very reason, Alex, her children, are alive today, and Alex was accepting the award. So to the ladies in the room, step out of line.
That's a really powerful story,
Yes.
Eugina. Yeah. I'm just so inspired by all these topics, and I do feel like, it's awareness, it's advocacy, it's action that we're talking about, and I think we could go on and on. I want to think about other types of diversity. I think it's incredible to have an entire session dedicated to bringing more female voices into the industry. But I know, Kristian and Dan, I wanted to get a sense from you of what else can this, and as the leader for TIP, as we're thinking about, what to take on next. There's geodiversity, there's supply chain diversity. What other types of diversity are you really passionate about and think that we can take on?
Yeah. So first of all, the the initial journey that we started with, which is gender diversity, we just continue that, right? Because even for Fyuz, we didn't reach our target. So next year, we will again have a target, and we will work even harder to reach that. But putting that aside, I think looking at this let's say from a 30,000 feet, this industry that we are in, the industry that is in transformation, there is, first of all, the overall talent gap that needs to be addressed, that we have brought up in a few of the conversations, maybe more as a side note on main stage, but I think that's the Dan's point. There's no way we can run this machine called connectivity by using 50% of the potential talent. I mean, it's just running the machine on half its cylinders. That's kind of not possible for considering what we want to achieve. So that means we just need to bring in the people and the talent. And where is the talent? It certainly is not sitting in Western Europe or in Silicon Valley only. And I think, because a little bit back to my personal experience, I mean, after working here in Spain, which probably was my the best personal experience in terms, I've told everybody why Madrid is such a great place to work on and live in. I had the opportunity to go and work in Africa, and you do realize that there are other parts of the world that unless you spend some time in them, you don't understand what really drives the change and what is needed in those parts of the world. And of course, it's not only emerging markets, it's also markets that are simply different. And that comes back to the talent. If we want to build global solutions, because we are building global solutions, that's what telecoms is all about. There is no way that we kind of just make local implementations. We also need to use the global talent pool, and we are not tapping into that, in my opinion. And I think Dan has some thoughts on that as well. So handing over to him.
Yeah, I might have strong thoughts on this. So I spent a big chunk of my career living and working in Asia, and I think about Globe, for example. Ernest has put together an absolutely phenomenal executive team, and if you go to the Globe office in the Philippines, you will see a very, very diverse leadership staff. But it's it's inspiring because you realize there is an operator, and I see Brian shaking his head. It's like, it's extraordinary. That place feels different than their biggest competitor in the Philippines, and it feels different because that is a really, pardon my language, a really kick-ass leadership team. But you see the density of talent that's come over, and it's built on a very diverse team. We don't have enough of those voices from Asia Pacific and Africa. I'm so happy that MTN has joined TIP and will be representing, because they're an amazing company. And again, if you look at MTN, that is a company that's built around a diverse leadership, and they're just thinking about this industry in a very different way. And I think that we need a lot more of those voices in TIP.
Could I? Oh, is that okay? So I actually only have been in 5G for a year and a half. Before that, and actually I'm a division chief of a group that does data science and computer science. I also have somebody who came over from IT and cybersecurity into my group. So I was thinking about diversity also in terms of all the capabilities that are necessary to make O-RAN work, because you don't just have with the traditional monolithic system where you have mostly a system engineer, maybe an RF engineer. Now you need IT. Now you need cybersecurity. Now you need data science with machine learning, AI, ML, and you also need computer science. So we're really having to have a challenge as a leadership team to pull all of these talents together. And everybody sees things from a different perspective. A computer scientist is going to see things very different than an RF engineer. And in fact, when I became a division chief of mainly a computer science group, I had a lot of resistance from the RF engineers. They're like, no, we're electrical engineers. We are going to program and we're going to hack something together. And I'm like, yeah, you're hacking something together. Use computer science. It's an actual discipline. We can help you here. And that took a lot of culture change. So I think it's really hard for people to change. They get comfortable. I think we need to step out of line and get uncomfortable and hear people's different perspectives. And I learned this when I first became a division chief. Somebody had an idea, and I thought to myself, that's a crazy idea. They wanted to, instead of working on, one person per project, they wanted 4 people to work for 3 months and then and switch around so people could work together as a team instead of being isolated. I'm like, that's a crazy idea. And I fought them at first. And then I thought, wait a second, this is a crazy good idea. So I think we need when we hear a crazy idea, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a crazy bad idea. We need that to hear. We need to listen, like you were talking. We need to hear the crazy ideas. That's how we're going to have the creativity and the innovation.
Yeah, Julie, you're reminding me of when I first joined Telecom 6 years ago. So I came from a consulting background. I was more of a generalist, and but it was people, like you who had been in the industry for so long that really removed that barrier of that learning curve for me and helped kind of accelerate my technical understanding, really the business constraints. And when I think about, I remember being like, I want to connect people in areas where there are less than 10,000 people, rural towns with less than 10,000 people. And I know that, a lot of people would say there's no business case for this, but let's not just stop there. Let's think about what would take what would it take to actually have a, you know, a business case? And, you know, and so that was something that, you know, just coming from a different background, I really wanted to challenge, and I was so passionate about it. And, you know, but it takes, I think to me, that's the, you know, one of the biggest takeaways too, is like, let's break down the assumptions that we have in our head about what can be solved, what can't be solved, who can be in telecom, who can't be in telecom, and really think about, you know, how, what I love about this industry is the second 5G is released, we're thinking about 6G. The second Wi-Fi 6, you know, there's so much growth and opportunity that, you know, there's enough to go around and to share and put people up for new opportunities and step out of line. I love that, Eugina. As we're closing up, I'd like to turn it over back to the panelists to just, you know, a brief call to action. You know, what's the one thing that you want people to leave with today? You know, if you can synthesize, what's our homework, and what can we take on as the TIP Diversity Committee, but also, you know, what can we as individuals go and leave this room with thinking about, you know, maybe a little bit differently. So Dan, do you want to get us started?
I would like to ask Cristina to get started.
Yeah, Cristina.
Because of my 12 years study.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. So many things to say. So many things to say. A lot of work to be done. We have made progress. A lot more to do. Where do I start? So you have to be a little bit crazy to transform the world. Open RAN, a little bit crazy a few years ago. Not anymore. It's happening. But you have to be a little bit crazy. Now you call it creativity, so nobody gets scared, but it's a little bit crazy. So that's one. The second thing, you talk about sponsors and the difference between a sponsor and mentor. I'm gonna go back there for a second. A sponsor is the person that say your name when you are not in the room. That's what we need to do. And it is important, and I look at the women community, it is very important that we lift each other, that we support each other, whatever you are in your career, whatever is the other person in the career, support each other. There is plenty of room for everyone. The world is big enough. Let's support each other. Let's mention that name. And let's identify the brilliant talent coming up and give an opportunity, because you are absolutely right, and you can take a person that otherwise would have taken 10 years, you can make that 10 years a year, just by identifying one person that is gonna make the whole world much better. And I think we have a responsibility for that. And if you are starting your career, or wherever you are in the career, look for for those sponsors. Identify, go after them. Hey, this is a person that I like their style, I like their integrity, I like the way to be, the leadership style. Because you have to have some, you know, you have to identify with the person and relate to the person. Go after and say, hey, I want to tell you about myself, and I want you to be let's say if I get you to a point where you can be my sponsor, and then as in the other side, listen to that and be a sponsor for people that to grow. So I think, you know, it's there's more work to do, and it's all. And then to the allies, thank you so much, and yes, we absolutely need you, and we can make the world. At the end of the day, we can make the world better if we have more participation of diversity, and we can accomplish business objective. Back to your statistics, business objective much faster, much better.
Thank you. Eugina, do you want to go next?
Why don't you go next?
I'm just going to channel you and Julie. I think the important thing, I think, is to remain uncomfortable. We should not ever just feel like it's okay to take our foot off the accelerator on this topic, because we're just, I mean, the numbers don't lie. We're just behind. So I think continuing to be really uncomfortable about this situation, talking about it, working with everybody that you work with every day in your company, and raising this as an issue, But more than that, like, the programs that get created formally are only as good as the people who actually internalize the ownership of that and realize that this is something you have to internalize and just make part of your DNA. So to me, that willingness to just be uncomfortable on this topic and to talk about it and to address it, that's what I really feel like is the most important thing to just keep the momentum going.
I love that. Remain uncomfortable. Julie, do you want to?
Sure. I almost feel like, Cristina, there's so many things that we've talked about today, but I do think, just this idea of listening and really hearing what people have to say. I think especially as an engineer, I learned this very early when I became a supervisor. I had a set way when I was an engineer and computer scientist. I'm going to solve it with these steps. I'm very linear like this. And I think when you become a supervisor, you cannot be linear. You cannot tell people, I want you to do it this way. What you have to say is, this is what I want to have done by this date. You figure it out. And I think you have to let people fail, because I would be like, oh, you're gonna do it that way? I'm thinking to myself, oh, I would never do it that way. And okay, I'm gonna support you. Let's try it. And then they would try it. And I have 4 children too. So you see this as a parent too. It's like, ooh, I know that this is going to end bad. You can see it. You can see it. And you're like, but you can't save them. You have to let them fail. You have to let them fall down. When they learn to walk, they have to fall down sometimes. And you have to then be willing to say, pick them up. I'm gonna give a Band-Aid. And now what do you want to try? And how can I support you in that? And people aren't going to learn until they do. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to accept the crazy ideas. You have to help the next person. You have to not just be looking at your mountain that you're going to climb. You then need to look behind you. You're climbing Mount Everest together. You're not climbing it alone. And you have to pull the next person and say, okay, this is how I made it through. I know it's going to be your journey. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I am going to support you. And then you ask them the questions. It's the powerful questions as a leader. How can I help you? How can we get to the next point? What do you need from me? Do you want to bounce ideas? I always tell people in my division too, do you want me to help you solve a problem, or do you just want to vent? And if you want to vent, I will listen to you. I just need to know. Just tell me what you need from me and I will help you. So it's that ability to let people fall down and support them to get them up and keep going in a different direction, and just being open that you don't have to be the one that solves everything. You can delegate. You can have other people have crazy ideas, and that's fine, because with those crazy ideas, you're going to come up with ideas you never imagined. You can't imagine. It takes a village. You can't do it all yourself.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about too is just knowing when to zoom out and when to zoom in. So, when do you zoom in and someone maybe needs your help and support and that kind of guidance, but when to zoom out and say, you've got this, and really just have the confidence and encouragement. I think that's a great takeaway. Kristian?
Yeah, very concretely, you asked for concrete objectives or steps. And first of all, to the diversity committee, I would say that let's continue working with those objectives. We have them for TIP, but I think we need to get them also to the other participating organizations and hold them accountable for it, not just for the next Fyuz event, but also for the work between the events. So how do we increase the percentage of diversity in the teams, in the leadership, and so forth? For myself, I will certainly look for that sponsorship role. I mean, I'm starting to get warm in my role, and obviously TIP as an organization is limited in its size, but maybe I have an opportunity to influence the broader stakeholding organization. So I'm definitely on the look for those diverse candidates that can be supported and whose names can be mentioned when they are not in the room. And last but not least, I think for everybody here and in the broader community, I mean, you do need to step out of line. You need to set up that hand that you are ready to take the challenge. I mean, that's equally a responsibility for all of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if everyone could leave here today thinking about who's the one person that I'm gonna go sponsor, that would be an incredible outcome.
Yes.
Yeah, Eugina.
So you stole my line because I was gonna tell senior women in the room and men in the room, by next Fyuz, I want you to sponsor one person a month. One person, mention their name. Give them an interesting project, congratulate them. So let's hope by next Fyuz, 12 people times how many of us in the room. That's a huge number. And for women that are in this room, I'm gonna channel Cristina, I'm gonna quote Madeleine Albright. Let's not compete with each other, because unfortunately there is a special place in hell for women that don't help other women.
I hope that we all come to, Eugina, I just want every one of the participants today to come to you next year and say, here are the names of the 12 people I sponsored. And maybe a couple of the, of the other side as well.
Yep.
But no, seriously, this has been such a great conversation, and my call to action is to please join the conversation with the TIP Diversity Committee. I mean, we really, the best part of this has been kind of the community building, and that's why we really encouraged to have a longer session and to leave room before the main stage starts at 10 to really just community build. And I think this is where we start to learn, like, who can we spot, who can be up here next year, and who, I think this is just a great opportunity to get to know each other. I'm leading the increasing the representation of female voices in industry-wide events. I would love to talk to you about joining our speaker list that we've created. I hope that we can bring this to MWC, to future events. It doesn't stop here. So thank you all for coming. It's been great to see everyone in the audience, and please stay and network and come meet us.
Thank you, Cait.
Thank you.